Hello, YouTube, or BookTube more specifically. So my name is Harveer, and I'm coming back to my channel, if you can call it that, after many months where I didn't really post anything, and I just want to be part of the community. I think after many years of lurking in the comments, I just want to talk about books with other people, and as other creators have said, just don't have that channel in my real life as much. I think not as many people interested in talking about this. So here I am again making a video. So I wanted to talk about two books today. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this video, I think. But I wanted to, in a spoiler-free way, talk about two books I just read earlier this year. So one is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Now, this is a pretty short book, about 250 pages, and especially in the fantasy community, right? That's quite a bit shorter than your typical 600-page book. So I think the lack of commitment needed for this kind of story shifts the perspective on, is this worth my time? Can I maybe just give this a try, right? And my spoiler-free thoughts on this. So we have essentially an analog of Area 51 in the real world, where there's this sectioned off piece of land that has, to an extent, like magical, like, or beyond the understanding of science capabilities, or weird happenings that are not explained. And we have this team of individuals with different backgrounds: psychology, a field surveyor, basically a biologist, and we are looking at an anthropologist. And the perspective that we focus on is the biologist, who is actually an unreliable narrator, as you will see as you read this. And I think that's a great choice for this story, given how the biologist's life around them, like her life, how it's progressed to this point, and how she's exploring this landscape in Area X, it's called in the book. So I think that was a great choice, and that sort of alleviates some of the gaps I find in fleshing out the characters. So again, this is a very short book, but it is very light on character details, especially in the first half. So you're really focusing on what is Area X like. It's a slow burn, and you're not going to be especially invested in the characters, in my opinion, in the first half, because that's not really the focus. And that was a little bit tough at first, because I find that for me, I weigh character work and creative ideas explored in a sort of similar, like a balance, really, for me. But anyways, the second half of the book, and particularly the last third, made it well worth it. So in my opinion, you should definitely read this, and particularly in a sort of short 2-sentence pitch for it. There are many ways that scientists and theologians and people of all different backgrounds, how they talk about consciousness, how they explore what that means, and if you can even ask that question in a certain way. And this book, from a biological point of view, a psychological point of view, explores that question, and really, what are the limits to what we can think of as conscious or having agency, right? And I think that's well worth it to explore. And for me, I have kind of gone down the rabbit hole with this question many times, but not from a sort of ecological, biological point of view before, uh, talking about landscapes and in the environment, and how consciousness is, and those experiences kind of ingrain themselves in that. So I'm not going to say really anymore, because I think that's already kind of at the limit of what I can say in a spoiler-free way. But to be to suffice it to say that I think you should absolutely give it a try. Very low commitment, and the ideas make it well worth it. I am currently reading the second book in the trilogy, Authority by Jeff Vandermeer, and I think actually it improves the first book in hindsight. And I think that's something that it's tough, and a lot of sequels they might go off in a connected but separate sort of a way where the story will still be interesting, but it doesn't necessarily improve the first book by a fair amount or a large amount. And I think Authority is definitely doing that, at least so far. Lastly, I know that there was a film about 10 years ago with Amy Adams on Annihilation. I'd say that that film, when I saw it, was interesting, but I mean, there are a lot of scenes, I think, in that film that are not even in the book or have a very different emphasis. And this is one where I will actually not really blame the filmmakers or those involved, because it's very difficult to adapt, in my opinion, and I don't think I really have any idea about how they could have done things better than they did. I'm planning to rewatch that film soon to just compare it scene for scene to the book, and maybe I'll make another video on that. We'll see. All right, so I want to move on to my next read here. So this is Flatland by Edwin Abbott, was it 17th century mathematician in the 1800s. A romance of many dimensions, Flatland. Now, a very simple way, I think, to entice a science fiction fantasy reader toward this read is think about 90% of the magic systems, I think, out there, and especially in what I've read in fantasy so far, in a very concise manner, in about 65, 66 pages. This book has a more imaginative, creative magic system than most of what I've come across. So we're talking about a two-dimensional analog or a two-dimensional universe, and our protagonist is a two-dimensional square, and we talk about other polygonal residential beings in this Flatland universe. And the author goes through the culture, the aesthetic of this two-dimensional universe, some bad parts of humanity, and some interesting artistic parts as well. So talking about on the unfortunate side, like a class system, and separating all these polygonal shapes by their roles in society and determining their worth in this way, as unfortunately we have had many a time. And I regret not reading the foreword for this book, because at times the passages in this book are very uncomfortable to read, because they get to very overt levels of classism and sexism as well. And I thought these were the true reflection of the author, and so it made it very awkward to read. And I learned afterward that a lot of this was intended as a satirical piece on how the author was living at the time in the 1800s, I believe, in the Victorian era. And the comments on sexism in the academic world and in general. So with that in mind, I think if you read that forward first, it will change your perspective as you're reading, and for the better. So I think it's nice to know that it's a satire from the get-go. Nonetheless, very interesting ideas, and I mean, talking about what are how do these two-dimensional beings, how do they see the way that we see, and how do they how can they differentiate their neighbor from another neighbor, or from their family member, and all sorts of wacky things that you very well may not think about when you start out with this premise of this two-dimensional universe. And The author has many rigorous geometrical arguments for things. Well, as rigorous as you can get with something like this, but and a lot of more loose but still interesting thoughts, right? And the conciseness of all of this is, I think, reflective of a mathematician's go at this. So I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed this. Again, very low commitment, similar to Annihilation. You just have those 60 odd pages, and it's just something that you can take off of the 10th place on your TBR and just move it all the way up, because you're not really losing much, right? You try it out and hopefully you'll enjoy it. I think you will. But if it's not for you, then not much time gone by. So these are my thoughts on Flatland and Annihilation. And at the moment, I'm reading a couple other books, sort of in a rotation right now. And I think I'll talk about a few things, books that I read, but also the rotation of books that I have right now going on. Just because I think sometimes a certain rotation of books works well and serves to retain your interest and really keep you going, keep your momentum. But then you can have other times where the mixture of genres or the subject matter or the length of books or whatever might just not work well together, may not mesh well. So yeah, I mean, I've hit this rotation that I think is working really well, and I like to share these ideas, I think, in future videos and just the books I'm reading. And of course, always feel free to share what you're reading. Hopefully I get some comments on the video. That's really what I can hope for, is some interaction that way. So yep, please feel free to comment, and see you next time.